Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most serious and widely discussed geopolitical questions of our time, the possibility of a US-Iran war in 2026, and what such a conflict could actually look like if it were to happen. This is not about fear-mongering or exaggeration, but about understanding the forces, decisions, and pressures that are slowly shaping the future of the Middle East and global politics. Over the past few years, tensions between the United States and Iran have never truly disappeared, they have only changed shape. Sometimes they appear as sanctions, sometimes as cyber attacks, sometimes as proxy conflicts, and sometimes as sudden military strikes that shock the world. The question is not whether hostility exists, but whether it could explode into a direct, open war. To understand the future, we must first understand the past. The US-Iran rivalry did not begin overnight. It is rooted in decades of mistrust, beginning with Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution, which completely transformed Iran's relationship with the West. Since then, both sides have viewed each other not just as rivals, but as threats to their core identity and influence. In recent years, Iran has expanded its regional influence through allies and proxy groups across the Middle East. From Iraq to Syria, from Lebanon to Yemen, Iran has positioned itself as a power that cannot be ignored. The United States, on the other hand, sees this expansion as destabilizing and dangerous, especially for its allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia. One of the biggest flashpoints remains Iran's nuclear program. While Iran insists its nuclear activities are for peaceful purposes, the US and its allies fear that Iran is moving closer to building a nuclear weapon. Nuclear negotiations have repeatedly collapsed, revived, and collapsed again, creating a cycle of hope and disappointment that has left diplomacy fragile. By 2026, this fragile diplomacy could reach a breaking point. If Iran is perceived to cross a red line, such as enriching uranium to weapons grade levels or blocking international inspections, the pressure on the United States to respond militarily would increase dramatically. At the same time, Iran would see any attack as an existential threat, justifying a massive retaliation. Another critical factor is domestic politics in both countries. In the United States, foreign policy decisions are often shaped by internal political pressure. A future administration facing economic problems, global competition, or declining influence might see a strong stance against Iran as a way to project power and leadership. In Iran, hardliners often gain strength when the country is under external pressure, making compromise even harder. If a war were to break out, it would not look like traditional wars of the past. There would be no clear front lines or quick victories. Instead, it would be a complex, multi-layered conflict spread across air, sea, cyberspace, and proxy battlefields. The Persian Gulf would immediately become one of the most dangerous places on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes, would be at extreme risk. Iran has repeatedly warned that if it is attacked, it could disrupt or block this vital choke point. Even the threat of disruption would send global oil prices soaring, triggering economic shockwaves far beyond the Middle East. U.S. military power is unmatched in many ways, especially in terms of air force, naval strength, and advanced technology. Precision strikes on Iranian military facilities, missile bases, and nuclear sites would likely be part of the opening phase of any conflict. However, Iran has spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. Iran's strategy does not rely on defeating the US in a conventional sense. Instead, it focuses on making any war extremely costly. Iran possesses a vast arsenal of ballistic missiles, drones, and naval mines. It also has the ability to strike US bases and allies across the region through both direct and indirect means. Proxy groups would play a major role in a 2026 conflict. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, groups in Syria, and forces in Yemen could all be activated simultaneously. This would stretch US and allied defenses across multiple fronts, creating chaos and unpredictability. Israel would almost certainly be drawn into the conflict. If Iran or its allies launch large-scale attacks on Israeli territory, Israel would respond with overwhelming force. This could escalate the war even further, potentially dragging in neighboring countries and turning a regional conflict into something much larger. Cyber warfare would be another silent battlefield. Both the US and Iran have advanced cyber capabilities, power grids, financial systems, communication networks, and military command structures could be targeted without a single missile being fired. The impact on civilian life could be immediate and severe. One of the most dangerous aspects of such a war would be miscalculation. In high-tension environments, small incidents can spiral out of control. A drone shot down, a ship damaged, or a misinterpreted radar signal could trigger rapid escalation before diplomacy has any chance to intervene. The human cost of a US-Iran war would be enormous. Iranian cities could face airstrikes, while civilians across the region could suffer from shortages, displacement, and insecurity. American soldiers and regional forces would also face significant risks, particularly from missile and drone attacks. Global consequences would be impossible to ignore. Energy markets would react instantly, stock markets could crash, supply chains already under strain could break further. Countries far from the Middle East would still feel the impact in the form of higher prices, economic instability, and political uncertainty. China and Russia would closely watch such a conflict. While they might not directly intervene militarily, they could exploit the situation to expand their influence, challenge US dominance, or reshape global alliances. A US-Iran war would not exist in isolation. It would be part of a much larger global power struggle. Despite all these dangers, it is important to remember that war is not inevitable. Even in 2026, there are still off-ramps. Back-channel diplomacy, regional mediation, and international pressure could still prevent a full-scale conflict. History shows that rivals often step back from the edge when the cost becomes too clear. Iran, for all its defiance, is deeply aware of the devastation a direct war would bring. The United States, despite its military strength, understands that another major Middle Eastern war would come at a huge political and economic price. This mutual awareness acts as a fragile form of deterrence. However, deterrence is not permanent. It must be constantly maintained through communication, restraint, and strategic patience. When rhetoric becomes extreme and trust collapses, deterrence weakens. This is why the period leading up to 2026 is so critical. The future of US-Iran relations will depend on choices made today: sanctions, negotiations, military deployments, and regional alliances all send signals. Some signals calm tensions, while others inflame them. The challenge for leaders is to avoid actions that leave no room for de-escalation. For ordinary people, understanding these dynamics is essential. Wars do not begin out of nowhere. They are built step by step through decisions, fears, and misjudgments. By recognizing warning signs early, global pressure can sometimes push leaders toward dialogue instead of destruction. In the end, the question is not just whether a US-Iran war could happen in 2026, but whether the world can afford it. The cost would not be paid only by soldiers or politicians, but by millions of civilians and by a global system already under immense strain. As we look toward the future, uncertainty remains high. The path ahead could lead to confrontation or compromise. History will judge the choices made in these critical years, and their consequences will be felt for generations. Understanding the stakes, the strategies, and the risks is the first step toward preventing the worst-case scenario. The future is not written yet, but it is being shaped right now, one decision at a time.